Hello, this is Kana Chakiak, and I will be creating a video guide to MLA in-text citations. I will be giving a brief overview at the beginning of this video to discuss works cited pages and how to create them using resources from USU's libraries. If you were to click on USU Libraries, all you need to do is go to Research Guides. USU Libraries has created research guides for English 1010 and 2010. You can click on them here. Then you can select English 2010. This is a research tips for English 2010, and it gives you all sorts of information about how to find sources, but importantly for this video, it gives you information about how to format your citation. So you click on Cite. You can use the MLA format guide. This is a very respected, comprehensive guide where you can find examples on how to cite properly, as well as the citation machine. Make sure that you check the capitalization of any of your citations against the information in the MLA handbook. You will see that I have a works cited example document. I tend to use a separate document to work on my works cited page as I create my essay, and then as I draw in from other texts, either found on the internet, images, academic journals, whatever it is, I will add in alphabetical order to my works cited page. All right, I have begun writing my essay, Evil Dead, a Metaphor for Living. It is a basic essay, and I'm just kind of writing it as I go. So I began my essay saying, violence in horror movies is expected. And however, in the horror cult classic movie, The Evil Dead, violence comes from unexpected actors. Now, immediately I've realized, oh, wait a second, I need to create a citation for the movie The Evil Dead. When we look at the works cited example that I created, I did not include The Evil Dead. So I'm going to head over to Google, and I've already looked up The Evil Dead, and I know that it was created by Sam Raimi. So I am going to put this in alphabetical order. So that is my basic citation for The Evil Dead. Now going back to my essay, I want to include that information in an in-text citation. So I would say, let's see, however, in Sam Raimi's 1982 horror cult classic movie, The Evil Dead, violence comes from unexpected actors. I have a next sentence, and it says, according to cult movies is the name of this book, Rough Guide to Cult Movies. I have truncated it, and I'm just calling it cult movies because there's nothing else on my works cited page that is even close to cult movies, so people will be able to find it. So in cult movies, this classic movie was created for a meager $100,000. I did not know that this movie was created for $100,000 until I read cult movies. Because it is not information that is readily known, I paraphrased the information from cult movies, and I found this information on page 208. So my next paragraph, I'm going to discuss metaphors. So conceptual metaphors are important for understanding the implicit meaning contained in phrases and visual matter we use to communicate. So I will credit Lakoff and Johnson, Lakoff and Johnson, and say it is on page 14. That is a parenthetical citation for a book with two authors, Lakoff and Johnson. Okay, so I have just said that metaphors shape the way that we see the world. Now, that is kind of a basic claim, but it is a claim that I learned from two different books. I learned it from Lakoff and Johnson, and I learned it from James Geary. So I'm going to attribute them as well. So I have, let's say I'm going to put Geary first, Geary, and I found that on page 18. I'm going to put a semicolon there, and then I'm going to put Lakoff and Johnson, and I found that information on page 46. That is a parenthetical citation with two different pieces from our works cited page. We're using James Geary and we're using Lakoff and Johnson. Okay, so as I continue my discussion about metaphors in this example essay, I've realized that in the book I Is Another that was written by Geary, there is a quote by Samuel Johnson. So in general, when you are going to be using any kind of source, you want to use a quote directly from the source, right? However, I don't know where Samuel Johnson said these words, and I want to use that short phrase, perfect cheats. But I need to discuss it in terms of Samuel Johnson because James Geary did not say that. He is quoting somebody else. So I would have this mini quote, perfect cheat, which was said by Samuel Johnson, and I'll put QTD in Geary, and it was on page 18. So in this way, my readers will know that Samuel Johnson was the one quoted, but that quote is found in Geary's book on page 18. Okay, so I've continued on with my essay just briefly because I want to show also in this example about how to discuss a citation outside of a parenthetical in-text citation. I want to say something about Lakoff and Johnson and their book and metaphors, but without putting it in a parenthetical in-text citation, right? To make it more of just a regular sentence. So in this example, I wrote this sentence. I discussed Lakoff and Johnson, and I just say what page number it is. I'd like to move back into this paragraph about metaphors. I want to add a block quote that explains conceptual metaphor a little bit more. So I'm going to type that in really quick. Okay, I've typed out this kind of a long quote from Geary on page 11, and I just typed it in. I didn't even put quotation marks or anything like that because it is 4 lines or greater. That means that I need to use a block quote. It's just a neater way to look at large pieces of text that you incorporate into your essay. I will format it and then I'll talk about the special formatting that I have done. Okay, we're getting closer to formatting this block quote properly. So what I have done is taken this quote and then I highlighted it, the whole quote, and I indented it together as a block. I also changed it from 2 to single spaced. And because it isn't a block quote, these quotation marks can exist within this block quote because I do not have quotation marks for the block quote in the text. The indentation, this big block, acts kind of like as a quotation mark. However, it still shows that Geary page 11 right here, which is not really what I want to do. So what I'm going to do instead is I need to write a little sentence that introduces this quote because we don't want it just to be plopped in there. This prior sentence does not say anything about what this quote is. So I'm going to write a little sentence in there just to introduce the quote. Usually with a block quote, they are 4 lines or greater. And technically, this is 4 lines if I'm going to include this parenthetical here. However, that's a little clunky. And what I would like to do instead is expand upon this idea a little bit. This particular quote goes on, but it wraps up at the end with a really good sentence that will work well. So what I would like to do is put an ellipse. So what I'm going to do is just type 3 dots to create an ellipse, and I'm going to look back at my book and see that there's another sentence that says, brightness, it seems, facilitates insight. All right. So in this block quote, right, we have 4 lines and we have an ellipse that indicates that in the original text, there is some information that I am not quoting. You need to set up your quote. This is a very simple, basic setup, but you also need to contextualize your quote. In this essay, this sentence does not relate to this quote. So I need to write a sentence that will contextualize this quote into my essay. One thing to make sure that you notice is that there is no tab here. This is all still one paragraph. Okay, so I've added just a very basic sentence to try to link this quote with my next section. This is just a basic example of how to incorporate a block quote into your essay. Remember, a block quote is 4 or more lines. You then put them into a single spaced format with just the page number. Make sure that you introduce the quote, including the author. If you do not include the author as part of the introduction of the quote, you must place it here. So if I didn't have Geary asserts, I would have Geary 11 at the end of my block quote. All right, well, I've given you a brief overview of the different ways to use in-text citations for your essays. I've also given you a resource, USU Libraries, in order to find information about how to get different sources.